ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. There's no guest joining me today, so I'll have plenty of time to interact with comments. So do fire comments in, and yeah, I would appreciate that. So lots to talk about as ever. I'll start with a few very quick things before we go to get into the media matters. Just had a message from someone today on social media. Someone that they'd received a summary of what their child was about to be taught. I think it was a 10-year-old son, what is about to be taught in sex education at school. And the father was very concerned about that, asked for some more information. I sent our Corrupting Young Minds book. He was horrified by it all, very concerned indeed. It was just a reminder that this is an ongoing issue, that when these resources were new, we kicked up a lot of fuss. There was a lot of controversy. The mainstream media wouldn't touch it, but a lot of people were very concerned. But we're now in the phase where these resources are being used week in, week out, in schools across Scotland, corrupting and sexualizing and confusing children and young people. I don't like the word young people, they're children in school. So that was just a reminder that that's an ongoing issue there. And now last week, I should have been at the ARC conference on Tuesday during the live stream, at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship conference down in London. Neil Deepnarain, Ewan Morris and Hamish Goldie-Scott, 3 people went from the Scottish Family Party, but I wasn't well, so I was here and just about managed to do the live stream. But it's been interesting hearing feedback about that. I mean, it's a very impressive event. Speakers from all over the world. I mean, some conclusions from it. I think it's quite interesting that Scotland is sort of completely unrepresented at these things, so that there are not really Scottish figures that are part of this scene. Which is quite interesting. Let's hope they ARC do something in Scotland one day, maybe next year. Let's see how things unfold. The big picture, though, from our delegates was they're saying that ARC, its fundamental philosophy is quite sort of family party-ish. It's quite socially conservative. You know, family, mum and dad and the kids, marriage, these sort of things are quite at the heart of what they're all about. But then it seemed more broadly as more just a general sort of right-wing sort of gathering. So at the heart of ARC, you've got these socially conservative values. Then you've got the likes of Nigel Farage, and you've got reform people and the Conservative Party, a lot of people floating around, who are not really social conservatives. So there's a bit of a mismatch between the philosophy of the event and the organisation and the philosophy of the UK political figures that they have speaking at it. Which is interesting. It's interesting that tension is there. How would we like that tension to resolve itself? We'd like it to resolve itself by people seeing through these other parties, seeing that they're not socially conservative. They don't actually have a core of positive values. So you can abandon them and all come to the family party instead. So I think the Scottish Family Party's philosophy is more in sync with ARC than the Reform and the Conservatives. Let's put it that way. So yeah, it was unfortunate I couldn't make that. I'll hope to go next year. I'm sure that would be good. Now, last week I did one of my cardinal sins. I do this time and time again. You should be unforgiving. I keep putting things in the title of the live stream and then not getting around to talk about them during the hour. But there was one last week that got left out. It was something like AI is a genius, and I just wanted to share a little chat I had with ChatGPT, which was very interesting. So it started off, I said, suggest policies to enhance economic growth in the UK. That's my question. And it gave, how many? 7? 7 policies, all very sensible stuff. So I said, right, thanks very much. I said, those policies seem like just about the opposite of what the Labour Party is doing. And ChatGPT said, exactly. It said Labour's approach tends to lean towards higher taxes, more regulation, etc., which tend to work against economic growth. So why do they talk so much about economic growth, but then introduce policies that would produce the opposite? Why do they do that? And ChatGPT says Labour talks about economic growth because it's politically essential. People want higher pay, better jobs, a strong economy. However, their ideology and policies often undermine growth because they prioritize redistribution, state control, and regulation over the free market. It's pretty straight down the line from ChatGPT. So that, right, we're on a roll here. Let's carry on with this. So I said, okay, thanks. I said, why do left-wingers who claim to be concerned for the most vulnerable support abortion? And ChatGPT said, that's a great question, and it highlights a deep contradiction in left-wing ideology. Left-wingers tend to stand for the weak, the oppressed, the vulnerable, but they overwhelmingly support abortion, which destroys the most vulnerable human lives of all, unborn babies, says ChatGPT. It's quite remarkable. So it then went on to explain to me, why do left-wingers support abortion? It says they've got a misguided view of rights, a secular materialistic worldview, feminist influence, a misguided focus on compassion towards the mothers, and political tribalism. It then went on to talk about the contradiction in very stark terms. And then it finished off by saying true compassion is protecting unborn babies as valuable human lives, supporting mothers with real alternatives, and promoting a culture of life based on Christian values and moral truth. That's what ChatGPT says. Now, I then said to it, I said, ChatGPT, are you just telling me what I want to hear here? Have you worked out what I think? And you're just sort of pandering to my opinions. And it said, no. It said, no, I'm not. It just so happens that on these issues, my logic and your opinions just happen to give the same results. So, yeah, absolutely. ChatGPT based. Some people have said that they found it biased. I mean, maybe it is biased in certain ways, but certainly on a lot of things I've been talking to about recently, it's been absolutely spot on. So, right, good evening, everyone, and evening, Dominic. Right, so let's see what else. Last week's live stream was interesting. It didn't get broadcast on Facebook. There was some problem. So I went ahead with a live stream and then afterwards saw what the problem was. And are you ready for the problem with last week's Scottish Family Party live stream, according to Facebook? It is this. Okay, how about that then? Wherever did that come from? I do not know. Cannot imagine how they possibly came up with this. It can't even have been the content. It can't have been anything that Phil and I said during the show, because the problem came up like as soon as the show was starting. So either it's just a total mistake, or someone reported it. Someone went on and before the live stream was started, they reported it to Facebook for those reasons, and Facebook somehow played safe or other. Anyway, so I'm sure that's the one. I did appeal, and it hasn't been reinstated. But I think according to my dashboard here, we are broadcasted on Facebook. And so I'll be very careful that there's none of those things going on in the live stream this week, as there wasn't last week either. But anyway, I thought that was quite amusing. But that was that. I would say overall, we've had less problems with social media recently. It's quite a long time since we've had any problems on YouTube. Same with Facebook. X, very occasionally we have problems. Yeah, there haven't been problems on X particularly either. So we've been having a fairly clean run of things, which is good. Right, the big story of the week. I'm sure you'll have seen this story. Rose Doherty, the lady in Glasgow, being arrested under the buffer zone law, the first person to be so in Scotland. I actually filmed that, so I was standing next to Rose when that happened. Now, I think what this has achieved, as far as I'm concerned, what this has really achieved big time is it's shown people exactly what this legislation involved. Because during the time it was being debated and it was being discussed in the media, it was all about harassment and intimidation and molestation and blocking entrances. I mean, all sorts of ridiculous things that are nothing like what actually goes on. Whereas what Rose has achieved here, is showing people what this law is actually about. Because Rose was standing there on her own with a placard that said something like, coercion is a crime, talk to me only if you want to. And the police just came along and arrested her, handcuffed her, and took her away in the police car. She's obviously been released now and is awaiting a trial. So we'll see how that goes. I'll probably go along to court when that's in court, and let's see what happens. This was shocking. It was indeed shocking. And I think that's why it was so important for Rose to do this. to show people exactly what was going on. Now, looking at a lot of the comments, a lot of people said, "Oh, the police are terrible. What are the police doing? That's really awful, the police." Yes, completely agree. But the police are implementing the law passed by the Parliament. Only one MSP, John Mason, voted against it. The vast majority of the MSPs voted for it, or a tiny handful were absent or abstained or whatever. So we need to blame the Parliament. Now, again, people might say, all right, because MSPs of all the parties basically backed it, including the Conservatives. So if anyone then thinks, oh, that shows we need the Reform Party in there, well, they've been totally silent on the issue. They don't say anything about buffer zones, really, and they're certainly not pro-life. So this issue in Scotland, this is the Scottish Family Party. So your choice is support people like Rose being put in handcuffs and arrested for offering help and trying to steer people away from killing their own children, their unborn children. Then if you're on our side of that discussion, then politically you need to be supporting the Scottish Family. Scottish Family Party. There really is no other way. Extremely courageous, yes, indeed. There were no high priority issues for the police to attend to at that time. Remarkable. Yes. Now, the time Rose was arrested, just a couple of police officers came along. There's maybe 3 in total. The previous week, it took them about 3 or 4 goes before they actually arrested her. The previous week, there was something like 8 or 10 police officers there, milling around, trying to decide what to do about it. So, yeah, total waste of police time. And also, will Rose be convicted for holding that placard? I'm not sure she will. I don't know. We'll have to see. Now, I've made a video today. I'm going to release it tomorrow evening, so don't miss it. It's very entertaining in some points. It's a BBC podcast about the issue, and they've got Gillian Mackay on. Gillian Mackay, the architect of the law, the Green MSP who proposed this law, pushed it through the Parliament. She refers to it as her law. And during the conversation, it's really quite remarkable. Basically, the BBC journalist, who does a good job, he said, so if Rose went and stood there with no placards tomorrow, would she be arrested? And the Gillian Mackay said, yes, she would. The placard's not the key thing. Yes, she would be arrested. But then he keeps asking her about that. And Gillian Mackay sort of changes her mind and says, well, no, she probably wouldn't be. So he keeps trying to pin her down and say, well, would she or wouldn't she? And the person the architect of the law can't answer the question, which really is the crucial question. What happens to a person or 2 people standing there just praying in the head or whatever, no placards, key point to address in the law, but they failed to do it, so the law is vague. They then talked about how the law relates to what people do in their own home, because it's quite clear that if you do something, say, in your living room, if people can see it from a public area, then that could be breaking the law. So if you have, say, if you stand in your living room praying, visibly praying, then someone could say, I could see that from a public space. So that was trying to influence people. So you're breaking the law, and the police could come and, I don't know, knock on your door and arrest you. Now, I think it's probably unlikely that would happen, but in theory, it could happen. The law is absolutely clear. In theory, that could happen. When Gillian Mackay was being asked about this, she ended up saying she doesn't know anyone who can pray so loud that you would see them from outside their house. She doesn't know anyone who can pray so loud that you would see them from outside the house. I mean, we're descending into farce here. She also said, I don't know anyone who can see into people's living rooms. Well, I think anyone who walks along the street, quite often ground floor properties, they have these window things and they're see-through, they're transparent. You can see into people's living rooms. And so she was talking, absolute embarrassing rubbish, just showing that she hasn't got a clue. She hasn't thought it through. She doesn't understand the implications of what she repeatedly calls her law. So don't miss that tomorrow. It's quite a short video, but keep an eye open for that tomorrow evening. As I say, I filmed the video. It was published by Alliance Defending Freedom. We published as well. I think between the 2 of us, it was being viewed by 2 or 3 million, probably about 3 million people well viewed by us, appeared on their X feed. Let's put it that way. It's been watched by hundreds of thousands of people around the world, but a lot of people in Scotland as well. So we gained about 1,000 followers on X through it, which is good news. So yeah, that was the story there. Quite shocking to see it happening. I mean, actually standing there, watching the police getting their handcuffs out, putting them on roads, leading her away is quite a sobering experience. I would so like to be able to speak to Kate Forbes and say, are you pleased with yourself? This is what you voted for. How are you feeling about that now? Do you regret that now? But obviously we won't have the opportunity to do that. Right, moving on. So the video coming out about that tomorrow. So I'll move on from that for now. Yeah, I'll summarize this story very quickly. I made a video about this as well. So the Scottish Conservatives said that they're going to do like a Scottish DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, copying Elon Musk's thing in America. Anna Sawyer has actually said this pretty well the same thing as well. I mean, I just think it's almost embarrassing that like the idea that you're going to cut unnecessary government spending, should not that be a permanent priority for any political party, especially the Conservatives? But for any party, you should always be alert to seeing places where the government's wasting money and to cut back on that, to eliminate that waste. But sometimes it's worse than waste. It's actually counterproductive what it's spent on. A lot of the campaigning groups that the Scottish government funds, it's not just that they'd be better off flushing the money. Well, they would be better off flushing the money down the toilet because the groups actually do harm that they fund. Yeah, so the Scottish Conservatives and Labour are doing this, but a Conservative MSP in the Northeast, in what appears to be a preparation phase to get together material to talk about government waste, has been bombarding the parliamentary question system with, like 900 questions, like 300 in one day, 275 in another day, and repetitive questions on the most ridiculous nonsense. And these questions cost about at least £100 each to answer in the Parliament. So it's basically a hugely inefficient and wasteful approach to saving money by the government. So that's and that's a bit embarrassing for the Scottish Conservatives. Let's put it that way. Right, this is back to Anna Sawyer. I mean, virtually every week on the live stream, there's a horror story or two about what's going on in schools. There's a couple more this evening, very serious ones. But this was quite interesting. So this is from Anna Sawyer. So he said he's pledging to chart a new direction for our country. He said, there can never be a repeat of the sickening attack which took place in Wade Academy in Fife when a young girl was viciously attacked by fellow pupil in the classroom, where the entire ordeal was filmed on a mobile phone. I tell you, it does seem to be Fife is the epicenter of school problems in Scotland. Anyway, more and more pupils are feeling unsafe in our classrooms. Yeah, it's not just the pupils, it's the teachers as well. The mental health of our young people is being undermined with catastrophic results. This has to end. Yes, I would agree. I mean, I think like the mental health card is played much too liberally these days. It's used to describe all sorts of things that should be just seen as the ordinary ups and downs of life. But people are subjected to like repeated violence, bullying, intimidation, whatever, at school. I think an effect on mental health is a reasonable way of describing that. Then Anna Sawyer said, that's why as First Minister, I will ban mobile phones in classrooms and make schools safe, calm places for learning again. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? So we've got this absolute epidemic of violence in schools in Scotland, and Anna Sawyer comes in and says, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to ban mobile phones. Now, do I think banning mobile phones is a good idea? Yes. He says in classrooms. I think maybe the answer is not in classrooms. It's in schools, full stop. So kids just go through their school day without a mobile phone at all. If you just ban them in classrooms, well, they wouldn't. That's probably the time when they're going to be using them the least. Yeah, but he's saying banning mobile phones. Was that going to deal with violence, though? I don't really think so. Is that going to make classrooms safe, calm places for learning again? I really don't think so. The problem with bad behavior is to do with bad policies, bad philosophy, and indulgent, no punishment sort of philosophy where the kids are, you assume they're little angels underneath it all, and they just need counseling and encouraging, whatever. So that's the problem. The schools need to toughen up and get more effective punishments, and the staff needs to have their authority restored. That's what's needed. But Anas Sarwar says is going to ban phones. I say banning phones, I think good idea, right behind you. But does that really get into the heart of the matter? I don't think so. Right, let's have a look. Right, what have we got next? I say from time to time, don't you think it's unbelievable how many criminal offences seem to be committed by elected politicians? Like among the MPs, how many MPs is there? 650 or so? 129 MSPs, councillors. I know there's a lot of councillors, but the constant stream of stories of scandals and criminal activity and all sorts of scurrilous and scandalous behaviour is quite remarkable. I'm sure it's totally out of proportion to the general public. Now, why is that? Does politics tend to attract the wrong types, or does it attract the right types who then become the wrong types when they get involved in it? I really don't know. I suspect it's more the former. But this is just yet another one. I mean, Reform haven't got many representatives elected, but former Welsh Reform leader charged with bribery, Nathan Gill. Now, Nathan Gill was in Reform, he was in Brexit Party, he was in UKIP before then. I just said he was one of the more moderate, respectable sort of characters in UKIP. But, well, I say it's just a constant stream of stories like this from elected politicians. Right, my son's school in Perth has banned Wi-Fi in school, but then it's a brand new build with unisex loos that have already caused problems, as I told them it would. I mean, this unisex toilet thing is crazy. It's causing all sorts of trouble. Banning Wi-Fi, though, I mean, does that really make much difference? I mean, kids now with their phones, have they not all got mobile data? I think the days of technological solutions where you're going to have some sort of filter or block or something or no Wi-Fi, I think those days are over. I mean, they've either got the phone with them or they haven't. If they've got the phone, then they've got access to the whole of the internet. And it's as simple as that. So I think kids not having a phone on their person during the school day is the way to go. But the unisex toilets, there's something coming up about that. Instead of waiting for it, I will talk about it now. And it was a parent saying on X that their son's or daughter's school had introduced unisex toilets, but there were maybe two of them or whatever. But the kids among themselves had decided that one of them was for boys and one of them was for girls. How about that then? The wisdom from the children. Basically, the children can sort it out for themselves and overrule the adults' ridiculous ideas about unisex toilets. So that was a heartwarming tale that the children had got together and done that. It's just a recipe for disaster. And yeah, absolutely. There was the one case in particular where there was basically a sexual assault in the unisex toilets immediately after a sex education lesson. That took place in Scotland. But you can assume anything like this. What you see in the media or what comes to public attention is the minuscule tip of the iceberg. I mean, what's going on a routine basis in schools will be on a much, much larger scale. Right, this is I like going to the opticians here. Right, sorry about the very small text here, but I'll read it to you. Top public school under scrutiny for racial bias. One of Britain's most prestigious private boarding schools has been inspected following complaints that two pupils were racially discriminated against, and this is Fettes College in Edinburgh. Now, I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about the specifics of this story. But I can tell you what will be going on here with virtual certainty. What will have gone on is some parent, some maybe stroppy parent or stroppy pupil, or might have got in touch with Education Scotland and said, oh, there's some racism. Or maybe some inspectors went to the school and they'd speak to pupil after pupil after pupil. You know, is there any racism here? Is there any racism here? Is there any racism here? And eventually they'll find someone who'll say, oh, well, yeah, this happened. Actually, someone said this once. I heard someone say this. And so they've swung into action. Now, I'd imagine the incidents that they've detected, they're probably, frankly, quite trivial compared to what routinely goes on in state schools in Scotland. But they love to pounce on Fettes College. A few years ago, they pounced on George Watson's college in Edinburgh as well, trying to say there was bullying problems there. Again, but you can be absolutely certain that what's going on there is not really a serious issue compared to what's going on in other schools. It's the inspectors that are ideologically driven to have a go at Fettes College. They're thinking, oh, fantastic. We've been waiting for this chance for years. Let's really give them a good slap, because basically they hate them. The independent school, very expensive independent school. They want to get them. So they found a chink in the armor and they're having a good go. So if I was at Fettes College, if I was involved in the management of Fettes College, I would be very concerned that you're not dealing with reasonable people trying to solve a problem. You're dealing with people who are trying to attack your school for ideological reasons. I mean, have you ever heard of school, a state school, such a high school, that there's been an incident of racism, so there's a special inspection going on? You heard about that? No, not really. I don't think I've heard about that either. I don't think that really happens, but they're, I say, they know who their target is and they're having a go. So we'll sympathize with Fettes College for the time being. I mean, Fettes College, actually, in terms of its philosophy, it basically bows to the government's agenda at every opportunity, as virtually all the independent schools do. Some people have this strange idea that the independent schools, they don't follow all this nonsense that goes on in the state schools. Well, don't you believe it? Sometimes they're the most enthusiastic to adopt the LGBT Gold Award or whatever, because it's their way of saying to the government, please don't shut us down. Please don't put more taxes on us. It doesn't work, but they like to think if they cozy up to the government by following their philosophy, then the government will be nice to them. But as I say, not going too well on that front. Now, this is something I made videos about in previous years, but every year the Scottish Cabinet has a meeting with children. Now, which I think is just a nonsense. The idea that you're claiming to pick a handful of children who are going to represent the views of children across Scotland about how the country is run, and then the Scottish government will take on board the views of these primary school children and adjust the way they run the country in the light of that. I mean, it's sort of idealistic fantasy, basically. Anyway, so John Swinney is saying, we've done this, we've listened to the children, and we've listened to what issues are important to them. And let's see what issues the children of Scotland, through this Scottish Youth Parliament system, let's see what they've come up with as the top issues. Bullying and mental health, climate crisis education, and vaping. Right, how different are they from the government's priorities? Well, not very different at all. It's obvious what goes on here. They get, say, the 12 children together. They might be, I don't know, 10 or 12 years old or whatever, and they have a workshop with them, and they put lots of post-it notes, and they paint some pictures, and they all sit on the floor and push balls around and whatever, and talk about what's important to them. And hey presto, at the end of the process, what the children come up with is exactly what the government wanted them to come up with. So in other words, the government uses the children to echo back its own priorities to it, which I think is, there's ethical concerns there. Let's put it that way. So what you always get from these is the children put forward exactly what the government wants them to put forward, because that's what the children have been primed and guided into saying. Then the government can say, oh, well, we just listened to children. This is what children said they wanted, so this is what we're going to do. So look at that one, climate crisis education. I mean, Scottish schools are swamped with climate crisis alarmist education in any case. I mean, in subject after subject, children are bombarded with what, in some of them cases, quite harmful and worrying content. So according to this, the children are worried about climate change. Well, yeah, okay, sort of fair enough, but sort of what you expect if you terrify them with your curriculum at school. They don't learn enough about the environment or have enough opportunities to have a meaningful say in their future. They don't learn enough about the environment. It's really not up to children to tell the government what the curriculum should be. I mean, how about the children get together and say, actually, we want more maths lessons. We feel like standards are deteriorating in Scotland in numeracy and literacy. This is a really important issue for the future of the nation. We want teaching the basics properly. It'd be great if the children said that, wouldn't it? But they never will. They never will, because the adults who are shepherding them in the right direction make sure that they arrive at the right conclusions, like we need more climate crisis education. We need to have a more meaningful say on the future. Again, like 10-year-old children, there's not much meaningful you can say about the way the country is governed. Again, some people will be horrified that they'd say, what a terrible thing to say. But it's just the truth. It's just the truth. And if you're going in for surgery, for example, or your car's going in to be repaired, or someone's coming in to fix your gas boiler, do you want some 10-year-olds having some input to the process, giving their opinion? Say, no, we don't want to do it this way. We want to do it this way. Is that what you'd like? Well, probably not. So it says, Scottish government needs to find solutions to these worries and to put children at the heart of their climate action. How do you put children at the heart of climate action, apart from indoctrination and using them as political pawns, using them as like tame political activists? So not impressed with this whole process. It is, I would say it's abusing children. I don't mean abusing in that sort of sense. It's misusing children. It's using children for political ends, and it's completely wrong, but it's routine. It's very much embedded in the Scottish system. So talking about saving money, the Scottish Youth Parliament, the Scottish Children Parliament, just pull the plug. End them tomorrow, and Scotland would be better for it. Yeah. Because the thing with the culture of children's rights, the idea is you have to listen to children. So whatever the issue is, you have to listen to the views of children. Whereas on many issues, children haven't actually got anything useful to say on them, because they're not at a sufficient level of understanding. But you have to pretend that they do and go through this charade that results in basically the adults just hearing what they want to hear. So that's one of the things John Swinney's been up to. Back to schools. This was a headline in the Daily Record. Brutal gang attacks. I mean, there'd be various stories coming through. There was a stabbing, wasn't it, the other day in a school? And I keep saying it's not long until a pupil or a teacher is killed in a school in Scotland. It's surprising it hasn't happened already, but surely it's going to happen soon, and there'll be great soul searching when it happens. But the Scottish educational establishment is incapable of reflective thought. It's incapable of changing direction. So no matter what happens, the result will just be, we need to improve relationships. We need more school counselors. We need better mental health support. We need more teaching assistants. We need more restorative practice. We need more emphasis on children's rights. They're the only cards they've got. So they will be the cards that will keep coming out. Now, this is an interesting one here. There was discussed. There's this court case, employment tribunal going on about the nurse in Fife who's threatened with losing a job because she objected to a man using her changing rooms, a man who calls himself a woman. So the employment tribunal is going on. It's been talked about in the Parliament. And Kate Forbes has said that she unequivocally supports single-sex spaces. Now, do I agree with her? Absolutely agree with her. She's quite right on that issue, 100% right. Now, I think on the whole transgender thing, the most respectable, uncontroversial bit to object to is the women's spaces. So if you say women should have women-only spaces, that really is the tamest, most uncontroversial part to disagree with. If you say the whole ideology is wrong, children should not be taught that they can change gender. They should not be facilitated in changing gender in schools. The NHS should not be operating on the assumption that there's such a thing as changing gender or changing sex, should not be providing treatments on that basis. We shouldn't have a law that says a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man. that law should be repealed. Now, that's the whole range of things. But the tamest little bit, the safest little bit to talk about is to say that you're in favor of single-sex spaces. So what Kate Forbes there said, it's not exactly a really bold thing to say, but she said it. Okay, right? I agree. So great. But what I want to point out here is that this is a post from the Christian Institute. Because what happens with someone like Kate Forbes, a Christian MSP, Christian politician, is if she says something that's in line with Christian teaching, then this is what will happen with the Christian Institute and various other publications that they'll circulate. They'll say, look, Kate Forbes has said this. Isn't that an implication? Isn't that brilliant? What a great job Kate's doing speaking the truth in there. So lots of Christians see that and they go, oh, great. Well done, Kate. We quite like that. That's okay. But then let's say next week, Kate Forbes says something that is totally the opposite of traditional Christian teaching. And this is not hypothetical because she's done that on many occasions. I mean, she said, for example, homosexual relationships, there's nothing wrong with them. She's got no moral concerns about them whatsoever. So the Christian Institute could have run a story saying Kate Forbes denies fundamental aspect of traditional Christian teaching. Will they ever run that headline? No, they will never run that headline. So if you're a Christian politician, you've got a pretty good deal from what amounts to the Christian media, because anything you say that is in accord with Christian teaching, that they'll report it. It will be a story. They will present you as a role model. What a great job you're doing. But then when you do completely the opposite, silence. So what it ends up with, the situation this creates, is basically a vast swathes of Christians who are aware when Christian politicians say something that's right, but they don't know when they say that things are wrong. And my problem with that is that it's false. It's creating a false impression. And I think people need to know the truth. People need to be aware of the truth. Right, Bruce, what do we got here? Bruce, is this a non-Christian party? Analyzing Miss Forbes' faith, social media posts of the Christian Institute again. We are a secular party, but a lot of our members and supporters are Christians. A lot of our values are in accord with traditional Christian teaching, but they'd also be involved in alignment with the traditional values of other religions as well, and a lot of people who are not religious. So that's the answer to that. All right, let's move on. What have we got next? Right, this is as I said, a few things on the school behavior front came up here. So look at the tweet at the bottom right, Gareth K. Thomas. Now, Gareth K. Thomas, I don't know who he is, but he epitomizes the attitude that's causing mayhem in schools, that's undermining discipline in schools. So look at what it says. It says, their behavior might make you angry. If you knew their story, it would break your heart. In other words, okay, there may be a kid throwing a stone through the window or coming to trying to stab you with a pencil or kicking some other people in the head. But if you just knew what was in their background, you'd understand and you'd feel sorry for them. But Tom Bennett, who I read his book a while ago, it's very good. He said, what about if their behavior breaks the hearts of other children, equally or more vulnerable? Empathy and sympathy are what makes us human, but that must extend to every child in our care. In order to maximize the safety and dignity of all, students who abuse others need to experience boundaries and consequences, as well as, but not only, understanding and care. Spot on. But you can see Gareth Thomas there in his tweet at the bottom. I say that is basically the view that's infected education in Scotland. People who say that sort of thing, they assume that they're thereby burnishing their credentials as a nice person, as a good teacher, as a compassionate human being. Whereas in actual fact, they're enabling, facilitating appalling mistreatment of children in schools. So it's quite insightful there. Any Sharia in your manifesto? No, there's not. Sharia law is an interesting thing. People talk about it as if it's a monolithic set of instructions that are laid out somewhere. Sharia law is actually quite a fluid concept. There are various interpretations of it. I mean, are there any aspects of it that would align with family party policy? There's probably some aspects that would align with the law of the land, but certainly no, we don't have any policies intending to align with Islamic teaching in particular, though some of our policies probably would align with the views of some mainstream Muslims. This is the one I mentioned earlier on. My son's school made the loos gender neutral, also known as mixed sex, but the kids totally self-segregated. They agreed amongst themselves to use one set for the boys and one for the girls. Isn't that great? That's a brilliant story. I was very pleased to hear that. At least there's some sense in the kids there. Now, again, I think at the moment there's a tendency to feel, oh, you know, Donald Trump's in the White House. All this transgender nonsense has all been rolled back. You know, don't worry about it. The victory's won. Just it's a mopping up operation now. Well, not in Scottish schools. It's not in Scottish schools. So I think some people have been over optimistic about the change there's been. Okay, there have been some successes, and the transgender philosophy, ideology, it's not as strident as it was not too long ago, but still, particularly when it comes to schools, it's basically dominant. It is standard policy in Scottish schools. Now, here we are, Viktor Orban. Again, Hungary's pro-family policies are brilliant. It'd be tempting just to just copy one after another without actually working out what they would cost. But we try to resist doing that. And then they've had a system for a long time where they've said if a woman has 4 children, she doesn't need to pay tax. She would be exempt from tax for the rest of her life. They're now moving that towards women who have 3 children or even 2 children. Now, there's a very interesting consequence of this. What this is going to do partly is if, say, at the moment, a woman has 4 children, it will increase her motivation to go back to work when the children are grown up, because effectively she'll be quite highly paid because there'll be no tax. So it's an incentive for women to go back to work after they've brought up their children, which is one side of it. But the other side of it as well, I mean, there's lots of ways that taxation affects people without actually going out to work, as well as income tax. There's other sorts of taxation as well. But the underlying principle of basically wanting to reward people for having bigger families, women for having more children. Now, of course, I mean, do feminists in Hungary, do they jump up and down saying this is discrimination? Surely this is breaking equality legislation. This is treating women differently than men. I don't know. Feminists complain about it because this is a law that favors women. It's offering a special deal to women in particular. I think there's special deals for grandmothers as well in Hungary. But overall, I think the direction of Hungarian family policy is very positive. I would say, though, I mean, Viktor Orban, people say that he drifts towards authoritarianism, too much control of the press. Now, I don't know how true those things are. I think because he's right-wing, because he's socially conservative, then the mainstream in Europe, the European Union, the mainstream media, they're going to tend to be trying to demonize him. But I mean, I have heard him talking. He's, well, more pro-Putin than I would be comfortable with by a long way. So I think with these issues, we've got to be careful that, okay, Hungarian family policy seems really good, but let's just leave it at that. We're not endorsing Hungary. We're not endorsing Viktor Orban or any other of his opinions or values. But on this particular area, they've put their money where their mouth is, and it's bearing good fruit. And we would go along with that. We approve of those policies. Right, Saturday night, come and join us in Glasgow. We took our 18,000 lights to the Scottish Parliament a few weeks ago and displayed them there. And we're doing the same in George Square in Glasgow this Saturday, 1st of March, 7 till 8 p.m. The hour that we're there, we'll maybe have like 10 or 15 minutes silent reflection. So just looking at the lights, thinking about the lives lost to abortion, and you pray if you're the religious type. Then we'll have a few short speeches, and we'll take some photographs. And we'll also try and interview some people walking past and interact a little bit with the people going past. I mean, after it, I would imagine some people will go to a local bar or whatever, get a hot chocolate, and warm up. But do come and join us. In Edinburgh, we had how many people? Was it 34, I think, people came along, which was it wasn't a great evening. It was quite wet and cold. But do come along. I would say it was really good in Edinburgh. It was good for I think people who came found it quite a moving experience, and it was good to see people, obviously, as well. And it also had some reach on social media. We're hoping in Glasgow there'll be more people around. There weren't many people at the Parliament at that time of night, but in Glasgow on a Saturday evening there will be a lot of people around. So I think we'll have more interaction with people, so that might be quite lively as well. So do join us if you can on Saturday evening, 7 p.m. in George Square. Now, I made a brief video of this. I'll just summarize it very, very briefly before moving on. So they're talking about this women-only spaces thing in the Scottish Parliament. And Russell Finlay was asking John Swinney about it. And all John Swinney would do was quote the Equality Act. And the Equality Act says, maybe you can have single-sex spaces if you can justify it on a particular occasion. So the Equality Act basically says nothing. It doesn't say you definitely can, doesn't say you can't. So it just leaves you in limbo. Who decides? Well, take it to court, ask a judge. A judge decides whether or not you're allowed to have single-sex toilets in the NHS or whatever. So the Equality Act is totally useless. But all John Swinney would do was basically read out from the Equality Act time and time and time again. It's almost as if, I don't know, the part of a person's psyche where your personal view, where your own convictions, your own values come through, it's almost as though that part's not there with John Swinney. It's as though he thinks that reading the law and the guidance, that's all you could possibly do, that there's nothing else to say on the issue rather than just reading the law and the guidance. I find it quite chilling, even. It's as though it's just really, really strange. But that's our First Minister at the moment. Right, I talked about the ARC conference. I made a quick video about this. So Jordan Peterson tried to pin down Nigel Farage on family policy, family and marriage. And Nigel Farage basically was not comfortable on that territory because Nigel Farage is not a social conservative. He doesn't. He tries to talk the talk a little bit, but I don't think he's a hypocrite, particularly. He certainly doesn't claim that his own life has reflected, traditional teaching on marriage, for example. But it just became really obvious watching it that Nigel Farage, family, marriage, mum and dad bringing up the kids, that's an ideal. He doesn't really get it. He's not interested in the issue. He doesn't really understand it, and he was quite uncomfortable having to talk about it. So for more about that, you can watch the video. Now here's an interesting story. Calvin Robinson. Now I don't know if you've seen Calvin Robinson. He's I don't know if it's right to describe him as a priest. He was a member of some very small denomination. He was ordained. I think he switched denominations a couple of times. He was based in England. He's now based in America. And he was a GB News presenter. He got fired by GB News. I won't go through the whole story again. But he's now been basically fired by his denomination for serial anti-Semitism. Now, a while ago, Elon Musk did that sort of strange Roman salute thing that people said looked like a Nazi salute. I don't really think he was meaning that at all. But then Calvin Robinson did it at a pro-life conference. Now, Calvin Robinson did it because he thought it would be controversial, because people would think it was like a Nazi salute, which I think is totally out of order for, an adult, basically. I mean, let alone someone who's claiming to be like an ordained priest. But it turns out that a lot of the main reason why he's been defrocked, or whatever the word would be, was for serial anti-Semitism. Now, that's something I've commented on before. I think there can tend to be a culture in our very polarized society that if someone's sort of more or less on your side, you leave them alone. You don't criticize them. You just say, we're all brothers in arms and sisters in arms. So that's great. You're on our team, so we'll leave you alone. I really don't agree with that, because I'd raised concerns about anti-Semitism and other things as well with Calvin Robinson over a period of time. And I think with these things, you can't overlook them. It's not okay to say, okay, he's pro-life, he's pro-marriage. I agree with almost everything he says. Oh, it happens to be anti-Semitic, but no one's perfect, are they? I just don't think we can do that. You can do that on minor things, but like anti-Semitism, that's not a minor thing. This is not something to overlook and just carry on regardless. And one of the points that alerted me to this, one of the things he keeps saying is you'll hear people talk about Judeo-Christian values, which I think is a perfectly reasonable term, because Judeo-Christian values is a set of ethical principles that originated in Judaism and then were passed into Christianity as well. So Judeo-Christian values are generally seen to be in contrast to like Greco-Roman culture. Because at the time there was the Greek Empire that influenced the Roman Empire, and they had a completely different moral system. They would leave babies out. They would expose babies. So if you had a baby, you didn't want it, you just leave it outside to die. I mean, that's sort of gladiatorial combat, these sort of things. Greco-Roman culture, they were fine with that. Judeo-Christian culture, absolutely not. Helping the poor and needy and sick, Greco-Roman culture, not really much of an idea of that. Judeo-Christian values, very definitely. So Judeo-Christian values, that's a very distinct term that is entirely appropriate to describe a philosophical movement that started in Judaism, moral system that started in Judaism and developed into Christianity as well. Very much common themes going through it. But then what you hear from some people is they say, it's not Judeo-Christian, it's just Christian. We need to get this Judeo bit chopped off. Now, there's no good reason for doing that. And if someone goes around saying, I don't want the Judeo bit there, that could be, how should I put it? It could be a bit of a red flag, a bit of a warning sign that you might be in the vicinity of anti-Semitism. Because that's the real motivation. Because, say, Judeo-Christian values, that's a perfectly reasonable term. And it is, perfectly sensible historically. People object to it. If you look at their wider output, you'll often find that they're being extremely negative about Jews and Judaism to the point of anti-Semitism. And that's what's happened there with Calvin Robinson. And I will say again, David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party, in my opinion, is anti-Semitic. And he does the same sort of thing. Judeo-Christian, what do we need that Judeo bit for? We don't want that Jewish bit on it. Again, looking at his wider output, I would suggest that he is also anti-Semitic. Therefore, I think Christian organizations or anyone, I say, just don't touch the Heritage Party with a barge pole. Right, this is a quick report from Japan. I mean, IVF in Japan is massive, huge amount of IVF going on. And the government thought, well, this will be a way of increasing the birth rate. But as IVF treatment has increased, the birth rate has continued to decrease. Now, obviously, we can't conclude too much from that. What would have happened in the absence of it, whatever. But any idea that, IVF is some sort of solution to declining birth rates, evidence isn't really there. All the Catholics I know are very anti-Semitic. Well, all the ones I know are not. So, as far as so I wouldn't go along with that theory at all. Right, we just got 5 minutes. This is a story from a little while ago. I just thought it was quite interesting. In that the SNP and the Labour government, they've changed various rules, the tax system, benefit system. So they've basically made it more expensive to employ people. And the government will make those decisions thinking, oh, that's great, we'll just get more money out of businesses and then we'll be able to spend it. So that's what we do. That's what governments do. But the result of it this time is it's pushed the National Galleries of Scotland towards risk of folding because the cost of employing their staff is so high. Now, what will happen in this case? Well, that they'll plead to the government and say, look, we're going to have to shut down. So the government will give them more money. So the policy that's designed to basically make it more expensive to employ people, it will hit public sector organizations, but then the government will just subsidize them further in order to ameliorate the impact. Whereas what do private businesses do? Well, they just have to bear the brunt of it, don't they? I've got a video. That's good. We've got 5 minutes to go, and I've just got one video to show you, and that will just about take us up to the end of our hour. So I'm talking about John Swinney doing his meeting the kids and listening to the kids business. Well, Keir Starmer's having a go too. Here we go.
Your question.
My dad is a police officer and my mum is a doctor, so both my parents are working hard to give us a better life. How are you helping working parents juggle their life at work and at home?
Can you say thank you to your mummy and daddy when you see them later on today for what they're doing, as all of you must do? My job is to make sure that they have more money in their pocket so they can do the things that they want to do with you and with your family. To make sure the support in place, starting our breakfast clubs where children can come for breakfast, for support, and to allow parents to drop their children off so they can go to work and get on with their job. But the most important thing is making sure that we deal with this cost of living crisis and make sure people feel better off. Because when you feel better off, you can do the little things that matter hugely in life. Freya.
Well, I wonder what that process was for selecting questions there, because that's obviously the perfect question for Keir Starmer, isn't it? My mum and dad both want to be working, so how's the government going to help? And that's the question that Conservative, SNP, Labour, the whole lot, that's the question they've assumed that they need to answer. How do you enable mum and dad to both work while the kids are young? The question that they don't think they need to answer is how do you help families to choose to, for example, mum be at home with the kids full time, dad be working, and that be financially viable. Because Keir Starmer, as I say, would not be interested in that at all. So providing breakfast for all the children in the whole nation, I mean, really, for a start, that's a massive cost. It's a huge cost. And then children being away from their family for that little bit longer. And it's designed, so you've got to pay for this through your taxes. And then the sort of implication is, well, you better use it, haven't you? So if your kids are at breakfast club at 8 a.m. in the morning or 7:30 a.m. in the morning, and then maybe, you can just work more and more. You can work harder and harder. So it's moving in the direction of children spending less time with their own parents. Now, we're talking about these behavior problems in school. I believe that they're significantly linked to what they call generation daycare. I believe that long hours in childcare in the early years damages the developmental process. And one of the results of that is emotional and behavioral problems. That's what I believe. And as I say, if you talk to any teachers over a number of decades, they'll say as the amount of time children spend in childcare has gone up and up and up, then the problems, emotional behavioral problems, have also increased proportionately as well. Whereas the Labour approach is just to keep pushing down that direction. And as I say, I don't think it's best for children and it's not best for society. So the family party's policies, we don't really go in with a blunderbuss saying, scrap all these other systems that are in place. We say, okay, they're in place to help twin income families in particular, providing extra childcare and after school and before school clubs, all this sort of thing. Whereas we come in saying, okay, we'll keep all of that, but we're also going to have packages that are on policy that are designed to help families where they want to have one parent at home with the kids and one parent working. So, for example, instead of taking extra nursery care, you could take cash instead to try and help make that a more viable decision. Right, our hour has passed. Thank you very much for your comments. I think we will have a guest again next week. Who knows what will have happened by next week. Keep an eye open for the video I'm going to publish tomorrow, which is about, I've totally forgotten. About the Gillian Mackay talking about the buffer zone, where she says she doesn't know anyone with a voice loud enough to be seen from the street. And she doesn't know anyone who can look through a window to see what's going on inside her house. I mean, it's quite remarkable to think this is the person who's led a piece of legislation through the Scottish Parliament. And the last thing to say is it'd be great to see you in Glasgow in George Square on Saturday evening at 7 p.m. if you can make it. So thanks very much for watching and see you next week.